There's an old joke that the rabbis like to tell that if you meet somebody else who is Jewish, you say, "Don't I know you from somewhere?" Of course, we always say there's 6 degrees of separation. But the answer to that old joke is, yeah, of course I know you from somewhere. You were at Sinai, just like we all are in this week's Torah portion, because according to Jewish tradition, all the Jews were at Sinai together. Everybody who was at that moment and all of the future souls, whether they were born into the faith or they became part of the faith or became part of the community in any way, we were all there at Sinai. And as Rabbi Mema Swoler was talking about earlier, it was a moment of unity, which is very rare, as we know, in the Jewish community. That what Rashi, the great medieval commentator, was saying about our being one person with one heart, it's because it says that we encamped at Sinai in the singular. The text in Exodus 19 says, "Yichan sham Yisrael neged ahar." The people of Israel encamped at the mountain, but it says Yichan in the singular because they were unified at that moment. As we've spoken about already, we were united this past week, not because we were preparing for the greatest moment in Jewish history, not because we were preparing for the revelation of Torah, but because of anti-Semitic violence. We've seen this before, unfortunately. We know this hatred as the Jewish people. And in our own country, we saw the shootings in Poway and in Pittsburgh. And after Pittsburgh, we became concerned at Beth Emet, as congregations did all over the country. Are we sufficiently prepared? What are our protocols? What do we need to do? And so we looked as we were working on our building to make sure we were putting things into the building that we'd have greater security and that we would go through training to teach us what to do if there was an active shooter. As I heard the story from Rabbi Charlie Citron Walker about what he did so that he and the other hostages could escape, I thought to myself, yes, I learned that in our active shooter training from the Evanston Police Department about inching closer to the door, about putting some obstacle between me and the person who might harm me, about seeing what was around and throwing it if I could to create a distraction and so I could run. And those were all the things that he could do. Not things we learned in rabbinic school. But unfortunately, in our world, whether we're in a synagogue and other places, with the proliferation of guns and so much hatred, we have to be prepared. But the unity that we experience in the Jewish community is not the kind that we like, but it was necessary this week. Instead, we'd like our unity to be around the values we hold, the Torah, as Rabbi Memos Fowler was talking about, the Eitz Chaim that we grasp onto, the tree of life, that it should inform us and unite us. In the Ten Commandments, which are a focal point of this week's Torah portion, we read about the commandments to observe what we're doing today for Shabbat. And the Shabbat was supposed to be a moment of unity also for the Jewish people, and sometimes it is as we come together in prayer in other ways. But over the centuries, it has been an important touchstone for the Jewish people to come together. It's been an important time for us to create that unity, even if we're dispersed during the rest of the week. As one of the great Israeli thinkers said, more than the Jews have kept Shabbat, Shabbat has kept the Jews, that the Shabbat has been a time for us to come together, b'lev echad, with one heart, as we did at Sinai. When we read about Shabbat and the Ten Commandments, in this particular rendition of the Ten Commandments, because we get a repetition later in the book of Deuteronomy, but here in Exodus, we hear that we are to zachor et Yom HaShabbat, to remember the Shabbat. Later in Deuteronomy, when Moses repeats the Ten Commandments, we're told we're to shamor, to guard or to uphold the Shabbat. The Ten Commandments are otherwise identical, except for the commandment of Shabbat, Zachor v'shamor, remember and uphold. As we say in L'chadodi, Zachor v'shamor v'dibur echad, God can speak out of both sides of God's mouth, so God said Zachor and Shamor together, both of those things. And the rabbis say, Zachor means we need to remember to do things to make Shabbat special. We need to make Kiddush. We need to come together as community. We need to pray. We need to study. And Shamor, we need to guard. We need to refrain from doing things to create space for the holiness of Shabbat to emerge and for us to come together and be united as community. As Rabbi Citron Walker said in the call today, the White House call, he reminded us that Shabbat means to cease, Shabbat. I learned that word in particular very strongly when I lived in Israel because a shvita in Israel is a strike. And when I was a student at the Hebrew University in my second year of rabbinic school, there would be these strikes periodically, and we'd have to walk around and see the signs that told us when we weren't supposed to go to class because there was a shvita. But that comes from this idea of Shabbat, to cease, to stop. Zachor, remember, do things to make Shabbat special. Shamor, refrain from doing to create space. Shabbat is a practice of letting go and leaning into three qualities. The quality of what we call oneg, of joy, of kavod, of honor, and three, of minucha. Kabbalat Shabbat, as we're experiencing now, is supposed to be a moment of oneg, of joy, and then we go to our Shabbat table and we eat delicious foods and we sing songs and say words of Torah. Shabbat evening is a time of joy. Shabbat morning, kavod, honor. We hear words of Torah, we study Torah, we think about Torah, and we honor our tradition. And then Shabbat afternoon is time for that good old Shabbat shluff, the rest, the minucha. That Shabbat is a time of making an effort and also of letting go to create space for us to be together. These are specifically related to Jews, these laws, but we know our community is larger than just the community of Jews that observes these commandments. Even in our Parsha, our community is larger than just the Jews. The Parsha is named for Moses' father-in-law, Yitro, Jethro. His father-in-law, who is a religious leader of the Midianites, comes after the exodus from Egypt to bring Moses, his wife Zipporah, and his children. He didn't want them to have to go through the trauma or the trial of what happened with the 10 plagues and the leaving of Egypt. And so Yitro brings them and sees Moses adjudicating for the people. And he sees that Moses is trying to take on all of the burdens of the people on his own shoulders. And Yitro, as a wise leader of his own people, says, you can't do this, Moses. This isn't good for you. You need to appoint other judges. You need to make sure that there are other people that are with you, other people who can take on those tasks of the leadership of the community. And this past week, we also saw that kind of support coming from other places as well, from the Muslims and Christians and people of no faith, outpouring to the Jewish people. The first email that I received on Saturday night, as this crisis was just ending, was from a Muslim leader, a good friend of mine, who's a past president of the Council of Islamic Organizations of Greater Chicago. How heartening to hear from Dr. Salul, to hear that he understood our pain and our suffering and our fear. Moses learns that you can't go it alone, even as the greatest leader of the Jewish people. We need each other. We need the people in our community, and we need the people in our extended community to be with us, just like Moses did in this week's Torah portion. There's a story about another leader of our people, Rabbi Yochanan. He was a rabbi from the early Talmudic era, from the 3rd century CE. Rabbi Yochanan visited his ailing student, Rabbi Chia bar Abba, asking him, is your suffering welcome to you? Rabbi Chia replied, I welcome neither the suffering nor its alleged reward. Rabbi Yochanan simply asked Rabbi Chia bar Abba to give him his hand, lifts him off, apparently restoring him to health. The Rabbi Yochanan was known for being able to bring healing to people. But sometime later, when Rabbi Yochanan fell ill, Rabbi Hanina came to visit him and asked him the same question that Rabbi Yochanan had asked his student Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Hanina said, is your suffering welcome to you? Rabbi Yochanan replied, no, of course not. I welcome neither the suffering nor its alleged reward. Rabbi Hanina then said to him, give me your hand. Rabbi Yochanan gave him his hand, and Rabbi Hanina raised him up, restoring him to health. The Talmud asks this question: why does Rabbi Yochanan need help from Rabbi Hanina? Couldn't he heal himself? After all, he was known for healing others, and he had healed Rabbi Fia. But the text answers, a prisoner cannot generally free himself from prison, but depends on others to release them from their shackles. The Talmud's response teaches us that we cannot free ourselves from our own suffering. It's a beautiful tale about how we need each other when times are hard. No matter how learned, how wise, or spiritually advanced we are, we need to lean on one another and on God. I know that I'm thankful of this Shabbat to be together, if not physically, in spirit. It's a time, as we've learned in our tradition, to lean into oneg, into joy, to learn Torah and explore existential questions, and to take time for rest, to feel the love and support from others, to express our care and concern as we receive that love. We can't make the world completely safe, but we can ease the fear, soften the harshness by receiving love and by giving love into the world. Amen.